Hi, so the author I am using for the author study is John Green because he's one of my favorite authors. And the books I brought is Fault in Our Stars, which is his most popular book, Paper Towns, which is my favorite book, and Looking for Alaska, which is the book that pretty much started everything, and this is the book that I'll be referencing. And then other books he has is Turtles All the Way Down, which that'll be mentioned, and An Abundance of Catherines. So the first source I chose is a journal called In the Outsiders Club by Claire Malone and Amelia Thompson DeVaugh. And the two of them basically discuss their opinions on John Green and what they think of him, his personas. And they talk about how John and his brother Hank are YouTubers called the Vlog Brothers, and that's still an active channel. And then they talk about how John Green really uses his raw emotions in his book, and some of the books do relate to him. They're saying how their personas on the channel should be more realistic so that people can relate to them on that too. And at first, Claire thinks that The Fault in Our Stars is cliche until she reads more into it and realizes she really likes the metaphors and his use of language. But overall, they think it's important for John Green in real life to just show a little more vulnerability. John Green first got the idea of writing this book when he was working as a hospital chaplain, and he even considered divinity school but didn't go, and he's religious and wanted to be a minister, which I thought was interesting because I didn't know that before. And at 24, he broke up with his girlfriend, and he was really depressed, even though he didn't show it. And Looking for Alaska addresses grief, death, and it was about the main character, Miles, who's from Florida and went to a boarding school in Alabama, which is exactly what John did. So I thought that was interesting because that's a new fact for me. This book has been banned on and off in some states due to the mature content with language and drinking, smoking. Some claim this book was against Christian beliefs, but John actually aimed it to be towards Christian values by using the themes of forgiveness and hope. Okay. And the second source I chose is another journal. It's an interview with John Green himself and Jamie K. Barkdahl, and it's called Literature is Not a Cold Dead Place. And Barkdahl first brings up how children have a hard time being interested in reading now, but John Green actually disagrees, and he says children and adults do a lot of reading now, on the internet, and just in general, we're always reading something. And John Green came out with this book, which readers could relate to, as the characters are very authentic teenagers, and they really don't leave anything out with anything teenagers might struggle with. And he begins discussing himself as a young adult, and he was saying how he thought he was pretentious, and he was a class clown, and he was a little awkward. And in high school, the books he mostly read were teen-friendly contemporary fiction books, which is what he writes. Being a writer actually never crossed John Green's mind, but he wanted to at least have one book published. And like I said, he wanted to write the contemporary young adult books, which is what he liked, and that's what he's doing. And after being told that Looking for Alaska has been included in classrooms, he was surprised because he didn't think it was good enough for that. And he also thought the content was mature, but he wasn't as worried about that as he was it being good enough. And he loves creating characters him and the reader will care about, and to tell their stories in a transforming way. And then books now, like John Green said, with the internet, that children read on the internet and young adults, that books now have to compete against the internet and electronics, unhooking children. And he says that this is possible by writing a book that allows critical thought in the children, because it's important for them to have these like thoughts about a book instead of just reading it over and not really paying much attention to it. Like, have a book that really gets them thinking. And like I said, Looking for Alaska, it involves drugs, drinking, sex, but he doesn't believe that these are the significant discussion topics of the book and that there's so much more to this book that's more important to talk about than anything in those matters. And Jamie mentions how if he plans on writing more multicultural books, but he doesn't believe that only poor people have to read about poor people in books, or rich people have to read about rich people in books, and so forth. So he believes that really anyone can enjoy his books no matter what he writes about, and that books aren't subjected to certain cultures and people. And he overall is very encouraging to future writers, and that it really takes time, effort, many changes, and he even compares it to dirty water, because he grew up and he would like have to run the sink long enough and then wait for the water to clear. And I thought that was like a good metaphor for him to use, because he's like, you just have to get through all the toughness and retries and changes of words until you get something really good out of it. And that's what it is to be a good author. And the third source I used is a website, and it's John Green Tells a Story of Emotional Pain and Crippling Anxiety, his own, by Alexandra Alter. And in 2015, he struggled with his thoughts and had a hard time doing anything, which included writing a book, even after he published this award-winning book that turned into a film. And he's always had anxiety and OCD, which he goes to therapy for and has medications for. But like everyone, he still has his difficult times, and it's not always perfect for him. And a few months after he got through his depression in 2015, he wrote the book I mentioned before, which is Turtles All the Way Down. And that book's about a girl named Asa who lives in constant fear, and like this is what basically Green experiences. And he even said that this is the most personal book he ever wrote. The girl in the book, Asa, went through dread and worry at the same time, and it was a constant battle in her head, and she'd dread over small things and worry about small things, even like a cut on the finger. And Green wanted to spread the awareness of this book to show that even with these struggles, people can still have a good and fulfilling life, as he's a very successful author and has a very supportive family and has his own kids now. And he hoped that this novel would help people to feel the same way, feel the same way as he does to feel less alone. And he now lives in Indianapolis with his wife and 2 children. He has more than 50 million copies of his books that are in print worldwide, and that 2 are films, which is this book and this book. And I've watched both those movies, and they're both really good. And I've also read both the books. And John and Hank Green's YouTube videos have more than 2 million views altogether, and they both have he has that energetic and positive persona in a few of his videos, especially Crash Course, which I've watched in high school before I even knew he was an author. And like I said, when he broke up with his girlfriend at 24, he was depressed, and he even didn't eat for a few days, and he sought out help, and he went to his parents' house. And when he did that, he got on the right medication, headed back to Chicago, and that's when he wrote this, his first book. And he realized that writing helped him provide him with relief, which along with the family support. And after he published The Fault in Our Stars, he also had another hardship, and he was worried that he wouldn't write another book because he could never match up to the success of this book. But today, he's still writing books, and I believe the most recent one is Turtles All the Way Down, at least out of the ones I mentioned. And he's still a very successful author today, and I love all his books. Bye.